Okay, this is a little advice on setting the anti-scald high temperature limit screw on a Symmons shower valve. I wanted to see if I could get the water a little hotter, and I wanted to see if the limit screw maybe wasn't all the way out, and if the temperature was being limited by the position on this. Now this is 1984 vintage, and so it's 37 years old. I went to loosen the screw, and here's what I found. I couldn't loosen it with this screwdriver. With that screwdriver, what happened is it started digging away at the sides of the screw. The screw wasn't stable enough, or the screwdriver wasn't exactly the right size, although it's the best size that I had. So I said, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to be able to do an adjustment on this. And then the next morning, I thought, well, maybe what I could do is, I couldn't loosen it, but I could try tightening it. In other words, I could set the temperature for a little bit lower. Now, the only reason I would want to do that is because the problem is the threads. Once I get the threads moving, I'd then be able to back it out, even though it was slightly damaged. And I hadn't tried tightening it, so the grip on the screw for tightening would still be good. So I figured I had another shot at it. Sometimes when you go to loosen something, it won't move, and then you try tightening it. And I knew this one wasn't bottomed out because the temperature setting screw was not bottomed up. It's got a lot of range in it, so I knew that that would be a possible option. So I set myself up for that. I tried not to overdo it, and I used a heat gun. Actually, it was a hairdryer on this, just and some penetrating fluid, but I don't have good access to that. And here's what happened. I snapped the head off. Well, at the time I didn't think too much of it. I said, well, okay, that's it. I'm not going to be able to adjust it. But my thought was that I was no worse off in that position than I would have been had I done nothing. Because with the head broken off, I can't adjust it. I couldn't adjust it anyway. So I went about my business. I reassembled it, and then I went to have breakfast. And it must have been about an hour later, I noticed there's water dripping on the kitchen table. Now, if you notice that little dark spot that's right over the kitchen table, that's where a water stain has developed. So what had happened was this screw, even though I couldn't turn it because of some corrosion or weakness and broke off the screw head, water was still making it through up all those threads, and it's normally sealed by this little O-ring, and it's the pressure of the head of the screw on the O-ring which is sealing this. It makes a complete seal around the threads and the screw head. Well, anyway, it leaked. Okay, it was only a drip, but I disassembled the valve. I could actually see the drip. I still had the broken head. I just left the broken head right in that little spot for no particular reason. But when I turned the water back on, that's exactly where it was dripping. It was a drip, but over a period of an hour or so, yeah, it started dripping through my seal, and hopefully it'll out, and I can paint it over or what have you. It's a whole other project now. But on this one, I more or less figured I was screwed because, of course, I had to turn off the water, and until this gets repaired, there's no water in the house. Now, I got really lucky on this one. I said, well, I'm going to try to drill this out because I've got nothing to lose. This part of the valve is junk. If I can't drill it out, I'll have to replace it. And although replacing it may not be the end of the world, I may not be able to do it in one day. So I took a chance. Well, no, I didn't take a chance. I just did the last thing I could think of. Okay. I considered drilling it from both directions. I had access to both directions in this case. The tricky thing about this is, obviously, when you try drilling one of these things out, your chances of success are low. Usually the drill bit wanders and it screws up the threads. I could either try drilling it from the bottom side. Now in that case, a right-handed drill, the rotation of the right-handed drill actually tends to free up the screw, so that's a plus. Or I could try drilling it from the positive side. The plus on this side is that there's a little shoulder in the, in other words, the screw is recessed in there, so I actually have a little bit of a guide. Well, I tried making like with a punch, and in this case also with a pick, because this is compared to a lot of other screws. So I tried to, with the punch and the pick, and even turning a little drill by hand, I tried to get a little starting point in the center. And where I finally ended up getting the spot that I thought was best towards the center was on the bottom side. So I had it positioned. I started drilling right here. I freehanded the entire angle. It's at a slight angle. And as you can see, I lucked out. I did not damage the threads in any way because I actually came through on the bottom side of that screw, up the top side, without going through the threads. I kept it in a vise, which helped steady it. And I used cutting fluid and some lubricant to get the shavings out, just to see if I could not break off my 1/16 of an inch drill bit. Okay, I got it out. This was a plus. I'm halfway there. Now I just need to get a replacement for this, which could be somewhat easier than replacing that whole thing. And if I can get a replacement, and if I can seal off this O-ring, even if it does not function as a limit screw anymore, I didn't actually want it. I wanted to have it all the way out. But in this particular case, anything that will stop the water from leaking is the short term is my goal. Okay, so I just wanted to share this with you. Now, in retrospect, I didn't have to even do this because a couple of things I could have done rather than try to